Hello there. Today I thought I'd mix things up with a slightly less serious film. So I decided to give the time-traveling horror a try. Totally Killer is a comedic horror that follows a teenager named Jamie. She's being chased by a serial murderer nicknamed the Sweet 16 Killer. She evades him using a time machine and travels to the year 1987, to the day of the killer's first murder. That is when she decides to change history. The film was directed by Nahnatchka Khan and is based on a story by Sasha Pearl Raver and David Madelon. It was then turned into a screenplay by them with the help of Jen D'Angelo. It stars Kiernan Shipka as Jamie, Julie Bowen as her mother Pam, and Olivia Holt as Pam's younger self. The story is a mix between a slasher horror and a murder mystery with a sci-fi twist to it. It starts off by introducing us to the legend of the Sweet 16 Killer and then showing us the first of his new killing spree. The murder is a long fight for survival between the victim and the killer that ends with a series of stabbings. Then the killer goes after Jamie next. She panics and heads into a time machine that her friend built to try and hide, and ends up fighting off the killer inside of the booth. While the two are struggling, Jamie activates the machine and goes flying back to 1987. He ends up looking for the killer in the past and trying to stop his original murders in the hopes of stopping him in the present as well. The film spends most of its time following Jamie around as she investigates the murders and attempts to convince the victims to protect themselves. She meets with different students from the high school and looks into a couple of suspects. In the background, there is a secondary storyline that involves Jamie's friend in the present attempting to make a new time machine. The humor comes from a cynical place and involves jokes that compare and contrast the differences between modern culture and the backward world of the past. People there are a lot more aggressive, and Jamie ends up meeting a bunch of stereotypes that don't exist anymore. The visual journey follows Jamie in her daily life as she investigates. We see her go to school in the past and deal with the traumatic life of kids in the 80s. Watch as she embarrasses herself in front of the victims trying to stop their fate, and witness her battles against the Sweet 16 Killer. Whenever the killer shows up, we get a little bit of setup for a jump scare and then a quick stabbing death without much reaction from the victims. The soundtrack comes and goes with small samples that hit hard. It uses a good variety of music. There are original songs to build out the atmosphere of the past, and a few tension tracks for the horror scenes, and a bit of soft music for the rare emotional moment. Okay, let's talk about what they did well. This film has a fairly decent visual journey that's easy to follow and is filled with flashy editing. It does a good job of following the characters and making it clear what's happening. They also do a good job with the costumes and set design. They dressed everyone up in the terrible outfits of the 80s and gave them a bunch of bad hairdos to help create an aesthetic. There are a couple of times when it manages to make a hilarious joke through good editing and clever camera work, like during the dodgeball sequence. They made it look like a war zone, and the mismatch in tone and the reality had me dying. The humor has quite a bit for you to enjoy. The topics are a little repetitive and there are a lot of childish jokes, but if you find that kind of thing funny, there's a lot to laugh at. The film also doesn't take itself too seriously. It constantly pokes fun at itself and uses some of the humor to hide foreshadowing. I found myself laughing fairly consistently throughout the film. There is also a decent horror sequence near the end inside a haunted house. It's part of the film's climax, and they did a wonderful job of building up the tension before the killer attacks. The cast is great. There are a lot of different actors playing past and present versions of the people of North Fernan, and Kiernan Shipka does a fantastic job of carrying the story. The general cast plays their roles well and does decently with the humor. Kiernan Shipka gets to do a lot of humor, gets to do a bit of action, and also gets to act out a few emotions during the ride. Her character goes through a big loss early on, and she plays the pain and motivation caused by it in a tragic way that makes you want to root for her. Her character is a bit annoying with how preachy she can be at times, but a lot of the humor comes from her objecting to different aspects of the past. She acts more like a straight man than a joker, and she does it well. Behind all of that is a soundtrack that manages to have a big impact every once in a while. They use the songs in short bursts during big moments to try and amplify the drama. The tension tracks did a good job during the horror sequences, and the pop songs did a decent job of making the parties feel like a blast from the past. Now onto the negatives. The story is time travel nonsense that tries to have its cake and eat it too. The time travel works in a similar manner to Back to the Future, with every action Jamie takes changing the future. They make things up as they go along, and if you think too hard, none of it makes sense. It's best to turn your brain off and try to enjoy. The kills are kind of lame. There are only 4 of them, and there are only 2 more fights against the killer outside of those. The kills are highly foreshadowed and happen the same way every time. We see the victim alone, there's a noise from just around the corner, and then there's a little bit of buildup before the killer jumps out and stabs the victim repeatedly. We don't see much of the victim's reactions, and the kills are over in seconds. The only good ones were the first and the last one. Finally, we have all the silent sections of the film that could have used a bit of music. The film has a very sparse selection of songs, and even when they do play, they're short. Most of the film isn't backed by anything but ambient noise, and it makes it feel a little bland. Overall, Totally Killer is a hit or miss film. It has an okay production and a decent cast, and Kiernan Shipka is actually a good lead, but they didn't give her much to work with. The murder mystery is generic and the horror aspect just isn't present. You're never scared of the villain and the kills aren't all that exciting. The music is also just a little too sparse to make much of a difference. On the whole, the film is okay if you want to laugh. But if you're looking for a serious horror, this isn't it. It also isn't trying anything new. This is just another variation of the hero traveling to the past to save the day. They just gave it a minor horror twist. As for a rating, I'd give this film a 4 out of 10. Remember, these are just my thoughts on the film. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Bye-bye.